What's happening, YouTube? Another beautiful day here. I just saw a lady drive by. She was in her car, just her, all alone, with a mask and gloves on. And I wish I could stop to talk to these people and say, what's going through your mind with that mask on, alone in your car? Are you protecting yourself from your own germs? I don't know. I don't know what goes through these people's mind. I think they've watched the television for so long that their brains start to literally melt. Welcome to Zombie World. Speaking of Zombie World. Anyway. Whew. Beautiful day here. I wasn't prepared yesterday. I didn't have my hat on. Today I have my hat. I got a glove. I'm in it for the long haul. If Buddy would get on with it here. Come on, Bud man. But, I was on Twitter this morning, at Classic Learner. And someone had posted a meme. Or not a meme. An old newspaper clipping from the year 1900. I forget what the newspaper was. But it depicted Rockefeller. And he was larger than life in this political cartoon. You see why they want to ban memes, because even back to 1900, political cartoons were so powerful. But yeah, someone posted this political cartoon from a newspaper, 1900, and it depicted Rockefeller. And he was larger than life. He was huge, and he was towering over Washington, D.C. And in his hands, he held the White House. He had taken it out of the ground, and he was just moving it around, passing it hand to hand like it was a toy. And you don't need an expert to explain that to you, right? It's clearly depicting that Rockefeller was in control. That, yes, the government appears to be the power center, but in reality, this big oligarch, this titan, this larger-than-life figure with all this money and power, he's the one pulling the puppet strings, so to speak. Right? The government's just his toy. And with everything that's been going on, it got me to thinking to when I originally started waking up to how the world worked in the context of Rockefeller. And I remember I was watching The Peace Revolution with Richard Grove, and this is where I started coming across figures like John Taylor Gatto, who every parent should read John Taylor Gatto. And it talked about the Reece Committee in the 1950s. And this committee, they got access to the records of the Rockefeller Foundation, the Ford Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation. And they went through all the paperwork. And what they found was, in the early 1900s, I don't know, like 1910-ish, don't quote me, 1908, these big foundations, these big tax-exempt foundations. If you ever want to know where the power lies, just find out who doesn't have to pay taxes. And now I'm not talking about like, oh, Trump doesn't pay taxes, turns out he owes $400 million. Yeah, I told my father probably about a year before that story came out. Well, of course he's in huge debt, because if you understand the way the monetary system operates and banking operates, most of the elite real estate titans are in huge debt. That's not like, it's like, oh, so they don't know what they're doing financially? Of course they know what they're doing. If you have a little bit of debt, and when I say a little bit, like the average person, when you're in like $200,000 of debt to the bank owns you. When the bank loans you $500 million, you own the bank. It's a whole different ballgame. But you take out money, you take out $300 million, but you get a building that's worth, you know, times 80% of that. So that's how the game is played. But what was I talking? See, now I lost my train of thought. You got me on a tangent, and here I am losing my... Oh, yes, the Reece Committee. So the education system. So they got access to these records, right? They got access. So I'm like, how unsmooth is this guy? Now his dog is using the bathroom. This is what happens at the start of my streams these days. And now I have to attend to that situation before I could tell you about how the education system was hijacked and how it all relates to Corona and how it's all a gift if you have the right mindset. If you're done delaying my stream, buddy. All right. Yeah, he does his duty and I have to do mine. So that's what it is. So anyway, where were we? Yeah, so the Congressional Reece Committee, they got access to the records of the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation, the Ford Foundation, and what they found was early 1900s, they had colluded. Is that a dirty word? What do you mean powerful people conspire? There is no way. I'm sorry, sir, but if you're suggesting that rich and powerful people who don't have to pay taxes and live like kings get together and conspire, well, that's where I draw the line. They had colluded to take over the American education system. And the way they did that is how they do that, right? It's actually pretty simple. At the time, they used like $10,000. You know, just extrapolate that out. So imagine they were offering $1 million today. But basically they said, all right, any school that wants $10,000 can have it. But of course, everything comes with a fee. And in return, those schools just had to adopt the Prussian education model, which basically is the education model you see today, right? It's the 8 hours a day, bell rings, class to class, teacher gives you information, you memorize it, no critical thinking model. And they use that money to leverage out the education system, and before you knew it, pretty much the entire country had adopted that model, you know, and eventually they used, hey bud, I'm on a stream here. Eventually they would go on to use the government, right? And now we have today, we got No Child Left Behind, we have the Common Idiocy, the Common Core. But for me, having come through the education system, I had a bachelor's degree in history education, a master's degree in special education, and then finding that out, because I already thought the system was not right. And then I found that out, and I said, okay, well, now I know beyond a reasonable doubt that I was going to homeschool my children. And I said, okay, you know, it's one thing, this way, bud. It's one thing for the system to be a little flawed. It's another thing to find out that the system is purposely structured to be corrupt, to be rotten from the base level. And, you know, basic historical study, you say, okay, well, that's what the education system is. So at that moment, right when I found that out, and this was before I was even a father, I knew that when I had children, I would homeschool. Because once you find out that the education system isn't just failed, but it's, in a way, it's successful. It's planned failure, right? It's designed to dumb down the population. So you could actually say, based on the objectives of the system, it's actually a success, which is interesting when you just take a moment to switch perspectives. But I said, okay, well, if I know this is what the system is, well, then I'm not going to send my children to be brainwashed by it. So I knew at that moment I would homeschool, and of course now I run a homeschool business where I work one-on-one doing parent consultations, giving parents direction, helping them set up what they should be doing with their children that not only they wouldn't be doing in the school system, but never even crosses into the vision of what an education would hope to teach within the school system. I mean, entrepreneurship, marketing, sales, nutrition, functional living, real skills, construction, working with your hands, engineering, creative excellence, mastery of art, music, computer coding, all these things that children could learn that, the school system doesn't even consider things like marketing and sales. I mean, isn't the point of it to get children ready for the real world? But the point is, I don't mean to go off too much on a tantrum, whatever. The point is that I was presented with information, and based on that information, I was able to adjust to the world, right? I found out, okay, the schooling system is inherently corrupt to its core, and that's by design. And my response to that was, I'm not going to send my children there. Well, now let's extrapolate that out, right? Now we find ourselves in Agenda 2030. We find ourselves in Clown World. We find ourselves in Corona. I don't know how to throw off the algorithm. Corona world. And what really I find very interesting about human nature is the people who, no matter what you do to them, I mean, some of these people, you could probably go into their home and tell them, our objective is to brainwash your child. We want to teach your child, greetings, bro. Your chats are awesome, unique, and appreciate. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. There's nothing I like more than when I get feedback from all of you. In fact, I want this to be interactive. When I originally broke onto YouTube when my goal was to red pill the world, not my goal anymore. I'm all about functional growth, helping people, right? That's how I earn a living. I help people with homeschooling. But even beyond that, everything I do is about what can you do in your life that puts you in a position where, regardless of what the big bad Rockefellers are doing, regardless of what they're doing, you'll be set, that your life will be good. Because in the end, that's what matters. I mean, people they get caught up in the Alex, where is your shame muzzle, bro? Shame muzzle. I mean, I got my hat on. I think I'm looking pretty good. I don't like that I have the Under Armour sign showing because I hate materialism and everything all these companies stand for. But unfortunately, I haven't got to the point in my own personal responsibility where, I want to get to the point where I have my animals and I could get wool or I grow cotton and I could actually start making my own. I want to get to that point, but I am not there yet. And that's okay because everything is baby steps, right? I recently purchased 1.3 acres in North Carolina. So I'll be in North Carolina in 2021 and I'll be getting animals and growing food. If you have to wear a logo, that's a good one at least. Well, it sure beats LeBron James, Nike, and their slave labor. I mean, you'll get this guy LeBron James, and he'll lecture you about what a bad guy you are, as he takes hundreds of millions of dollars from Nike, who literally use slave labor in China. And he'll lecture you about, you're a racist, you're setting the black man back, someone spray painted a bad word on my $25 million mansion. Oh, LeBron. All right, but at least LeBron stood up for the people of Hong Kong, and until Nike told him not to do that, and then he got on his knees and he kissed that Chinese wee wee. See, now I'm distracted. I'm going off on rants again. Paid social doesn't have what was him? I didn't catch that whole thing, but the point is that he is social engineer. Well, yeah, I mean, right? We're all being social engineer. All right. Profound. I was listening to Owen Benjamin today, and he was talking about farm animals and things you could learn from farm animals. And the thing is, when you farm, you start to understand how to shepherd a herd. And when you look at everything that's done to farm animals, right? They are, especially like, I'm not talking about regular people, like little farms are good. Like when I get my farm, I'm going to get chickens, goats, alpacas. I'd like to eventually get cows, bunny rabbits, quails, all these different animals. And I'll treat them like gold. I'll make sure they have grazing area and they're well fed and they're taken care of. But like, especially on this commercial farms, what is done to the animals? They are put into small little areas, right? Little city-like areas where they're forced to live on top of one another. They are fed genetically modified grains because that's the most cost-effective way to feed them. And as long as they're eating and they have their ignorance is bliss going on, talk about an inverse, but they're eating their genetically modified food and they're happy with that. And they are chipped so that the farmers could take their biometric data and have all the information on them. They are vaccinated to prevent them from getting disease, even though they are mass pumped with antibiotics, because regardless of anything they do, these animals are forced to live on top of each other. I mean, they literally, like in these chicken coops, they live standing in their own feces. So, all right, people don't know this. You ready for this? The pharmaceutical industry makes more money selling antibiotics. When I was on a farm once, I made the mistake of feeding the bull. Yeah, you don't want to mess with a bull, because you mess with a bull, you get the horns. The pharmaceutical industry makes more money selling antibiotics to commercial farms, befriending. You might want to befriend a bull. I mean, I don't have experience with that, so I don't know how that ends, but I'm sure, given the opportunity, I will take that chance to befriend a bull. I'll probably sit him down, have a talk about the Rockefellers, political cartoons, memes, and the New World Order, and how that bull really needs to take personal responsibility in his life. But yeah, the pharmaceutical industry, they make more money selling antibiotics to commercial farms than they do to human populations. So that you want to talk about an unholy alliance. Woo! Big pharma, big agriculture. But when you look at how farm animals are treated, they're very much treated the same way that human populations are treated by, some people call them elite. I think they're losers, but I would call them the controllers, the Rockefeller types. I mean, if you don't ever think these people are elite, like, all right, take Anderson Cooper, right? He's a Vanderbilt. Do yourself a favor and look into how Anderson Cooper was treated during his childhood. The artwork that the Vanderbilts are into. Everything about, like, these people are in trauma cycles. And their childhoods are sexual abuse, physical abuse, their parents. I mean, you see how these people treat society. They don't even love their children. In fact, if you just do historical studies throughout most of history, these so-called elites are usually killed by their own family, right? It's like siblings killing siblings. And I would bet that still goes on today, because everything's about their title, and I don't want to say nobility, because they're not very noble. But in other words, don't befriend farm animals. I mean, I don't know what you're talking about now. You're making me you're a little too close to these farm animals. I was tempted to make a Muslim joke, but over time, as my understanding of the world has evolved, I've learned to respect Muslims a lot. You'll get like what you're shown on TV, and like how they use Somalians. It goes by so quick when you have the phone. But how they use Somalians and whatever it might be to flood England and flood countries. And those are like takeovers. But then there's it's just like the Pope, right? The Pope, the Christian Pope, or really the Catholic Pope, does not represent me as a Christian, right? He openly, at best, enables pedophilia. I'm not going to get into it now, but I would say the Catholic Church encourages pedophilia. Well, it's the same thing. Whoa, I almost went down there live on stream. Would have been hilarious. So, in a small window, I could be like, oh, well, those are Christians. Well, no, those are the Christians that are weaponized. Well, it's the same thing with Muslims. Yes, I'm going to call out the Muslims that are weaponized, the ones that are used to flood countries and whatnot. But, I mean, really, those are... They're... I guess the same way, you'd be like, oh, there's a Christian. Oh, is he a Christian? What does he do? Oh, well, he spends his day cheating on his wife and lying and stealing, like a mob boss, right? Oh, he's a Christian. That mob boss is not a Christian. He doesn't live one day of his life actually trying to follow the word of Christ. Well, so you take a Muslim that has a farm and spends his day praying and takes the word of the Quran seriously. I relate to that man. That's my brethren. Just as I myself, I take the Bible seriously, and I try to live my life as best I can. As I tell people, try to follow the path of Jesus, and when you come up terribly short, know that as long as you tried to follow that path, you're doing a lot better than everyone else, right? Treat your neighbor as you would want your neighbor to treat you. Lessons, actually, that's a good segue, because I called this Lessons of Corona, right? Lessons of Corona. I remember when this whole thing started, and people were afraid where their next meal was going to come from. And the reason they were so afraid is nobody knows their neighbor, right? These people, they live right next to each other, but they're not even able to go up to their neighbor that lives on their block and say, hey, I'm having a tough time, can you help me out? Because they're not friends. There's no trust there. Which, that's by design, and we could get into why that is. But people just feel like they have nowhere to go. And there was a time when people valued community, that community building was understood, why it was important, and why that biblical truth is so true. It's timeless. It's treat your neighbor as you would want them to treat you, because when shit hits fan, when Corona happens and the government shuts things down, you could rely on your neighbor. But there's so many lessons that we could learn from Corona. I talked about education, right? Well, I mean, at this point, you have the schooling system telling people, they're saying, we are going to indoctrinate your children. We are going to brainwash them to sympathetically view Black Lives Matter, Antifa, progressivism, socialism, communism. We're going to teach them a false narrative of history, that they should hate themselves, or that they should, and this goes for, I often speak from a European perspective, because my lineage is European, but that goes for people with an African lineage as well, right? So they want to teach you that you're a victim and that all your problems are caused by someone else with a different skin color, and that you shouldn't take any personal responsibility, and what you really need is the same big daddy government that legalized slavery to take care of you now. That doesn't sound right now, does it? But where the school system tells you they're going to indoctrinate your child. Your child's going to come to school, they're going to put a mask on your child. They're going to tell your child that their fellow classmate is a virus, is a disease, that they should fear human-to-human interaction. They're going to tell your child that big pharmaceutical companies are their savior, that the only way this world can move forward is if they allow big pharmaceutical companies that make hundreds of billions of dollars of profit to inject toxic metals into their bloodstream that allegedly melt your brain. Lessons from Corona. So the system is telling people this is happening, but people who reject logos, who reject truth, who don't trust their own discernment because they haven't been trained to use it, they will still beg that very system. Why are you shutting down the schools? Why are you shutting down the schools? Little Timothy needs his indoctrination. Corona is a gift. When they shut down the schools, that is a gift. They're giving you an opportunity to take some time and figure out how to homeschool, how to structure your life. Because a masked-hearted monkey could educate your child better than the public school system. A masked-hearted monkey. Yeah, but Corona hit and people were worried where their next meal was going to come from. They couldn't rely on their neighbor, so they don't know their neighbor. The government told them they had to shut down their business, or their business they worked for was shut down. And now here we are, X months later, and how many of those people still don't even grow food? They haven't taken a seed and got some soil and started planting seeds and said, okay, well, if this shutdown comes again, I'll have some food. Corona's a gift if you know how to view it, if you view it with the right mindset. But instead, a lot of those people remain in a state of fear, and they'll scream at the mountaintops, the government is going to come and they're going to put us in FEMA camps. Man, the government's not coming to put you in a FEMA camp. You think someone's showing up at your door with a gun? 350 million people? Come get in the FEMA camp. No, they're not. They're going to shut down your supply lines. They're going to shut down the food supply chain, this food chain. And people that don't grow food and are in debt and live their life in a sinful way, they're going to have no choice but to voluntarily surrender themselves to FEMA camps. It'd be tragic. I mean, it'd be funny if it wasn't so tragic. But it's a gift, because for many of us, just like when I originally woke up and learned how Rockefeller took over the education system, that the failure of the education system wasn't actually a failure, that dumbing us down has been by design. I mean, when children struggle to learn and lack the ability to think critically, that's the objective of the education system. It's not a failure, it's a grand success, depending on the perspective you come from. But I learned. I said, all right, I'll homeschool my child. Well, now we have Corona. And the government could come and tell you, you have to shut down your business. And I'll see a lot of people complain about that. You see, communism is coming. Look at the communism. Alex Jones says it's here. But what you don't see are those people say, you know what? I better learn my rights. I better learn how to use affidavits to protect my business against the people that are trying to shut it down. That the law is being used as a tool against me, so I better learn to wield that tool against the government. You tell people about learning their rights, they shut down. They say, what is this guy talking about? What is he talking about? I listened to an episode of Crow 777 Radio this morning. It was profound. He had on a sovereign citizen, so to speak. He would actually tell you that's not the proper language. He had on a living man who has not filed. I don't even want to say it out. Honestly, I'm not there yet. I'm too afraid. But he hadn't filed taxes since 1988, which I do not recommend. But he was talking about his journey to sovereign citizenship and how to protect yourself legally. And the information in that 2-hour talk was pure gold. What you could learn is pure gold. Change your life gold. Yet people, they won't take the time to do it. They'll just shiver in fear and say, what is the government going to do to us? The corporation they work for will shut down. And they're in debt and they have bills to pay, and now they're on the verge of losing their home. But they won't take any action to use one of their skills to start a business. And maybe that business will fail, but at least you're trying. At least you're trying. They'll see the government shut down their source of income, and they'll remain in debt. They'll say, oh, well, I have this mortgage I have to pay. Hey, how you doing? Oh, it's a beautiful day here. I picked that little puppy up right above that puddle. I'd stay in chat, but I'm in the middle of a... All right. Anyway, I know my neighbors. Come on, bud, man. So, where was I? So you'll have these people in debt, and the government will come in and tell them you have to shut down your business, or your business you work for is shut down, and now you have no income. But they won't think, well, you know what? Maybe I better restructure my life so I could get out of this debt. Now, I understand that for a lot of people, that's easier said than done. But like me, myself, in March, when this originally started, I said, all right, I better start planning to restructure my life, because I understood Agenda 2030. I said, all right, the world is changing fast and it's happening in front of me. And here I am today, and my house is currently in contract. It's being sold, and I'm going down south to live out of debt, to have my own land, to grow my own food, to homeschool my children, to have a business. And when you put all of that together, you see how we don't have to be in a desperate situation. That in many ways we choose it. In many ways we choose it. Profound stuff, right? Is that good gravy? So, all right, guys, this has been fun, but I need to go. I need to hang out with my wife and my boy. Got a beautiful weekend coming up, and maybe I'll come back at you guys later, possibly. I do have a car ride I have to go on, so you know what? I might go live on Twitter there, @ClassicLearner.